We've had a couple of projects tonight that have to do with local farming. You heard vertical farming. We're going to take sort of a step back and consider nature on a much larger scale. This next project is about natural resource management in New York City, and Crystal Mitri will give us the presentation.
Thank you, Professor. Good evening. As the professor said, I'm Crystal Mitri, and I'll be presenting on behalf of my capstone team. In New York City, we're losing natural resources at a rate faster than we're replacing them. Amongst the concrete and the cars, nature still abounds, but is being threatened by development and pollution. Our project is about how to preserve nature in one of the largest cities in the world. Today, I'm going to walk you through more about the issue we face, who we worked for, how we helped them, what we found, and what our recommendations were. In New York City, green spaces are being paved over and wetlands are under threat. I'd like for you to think about this for a minute, because we depend on these things for clean air and water, for flood protection, for recreation, and for tourism. Ecosystem services and biodiversity make life possible. The benefits we derive are directly tied to the level of natural resources available. Together with our clients, we would like to improve natural resource management in New York City. The Nature Conservancy is the world's leading conservation organization. Its focus is on protecting nature for its own sake and for the benefit of people. Historically, the organization concentrated on nature in rural areas. With a presence in 35 countries and all 50 states, our client is expanding their focus to nature in cities. As a part of its New York City Urban Conservation Program, the Nature Conservancy wants to improve natural resource management and to enhance the city's resiliency. To do this, it's considering developing the first ever mapping tool that would provide a comprehensive view of nature in the city. Before investing time and money into developing this tool, the Nature Conservancy needs to know if people want it and if they will use it. We designed and administered a survey to find out. Our survey was geared toward learning about the needs and priorities of stakeholders in New York City, the extent to which a comprehensive mapping tool is needed, and the extent to which these stakeholders are willing to work with the Nature Conservancy. We chose to use a descriptive survey for our methodology. Descriptive surveys are used to simply describe what is going on within the sample of responses. The results are not used to infer what the total population would do. We generated a sample of 453 stakeholders in New York City. We did this by researching online media, existing mapping tool users, and past environmental survey sample lists. 63% of our sample was made up of park, community garden, and water organizations. We received 108 responses, giving us a 24% response rate, which exceeded our clients' expectations of 20%. Well, who responded? All major New York government agencies, such as the Department of Parks and Recreation, Environmental Conservation, and Environmental Protection responded, accounting for 11 total respondents. The larger majority of respondents were from the nonprofit and civic sector, comprising over 80%, along with private firms informing 3% of responses. We also learned that land ownership of the properties being managed by all respondents was primarily municipal or state-owned. We found a diverse mix of stakeholders, dealing with very different resources and spaces. The type of spaces being managed were overwhelmingly parks, gardens, and wetlands. Over 30% of organizations worked on a neighborhood scale and were small in size, having between 1 and 5 paid staff. 60% of organizations were focused on education and outreach, and 69% of those on conservation. The respondents highlighted maintaining and enhancing green spaces, improving quality of life, and advancing environmental education as their top 3 priorities. Increasing awareness of natural resource benefits and improving equitable access to green spaces were also important priorities for more than half of all respondents. This data highlights human benefit is very much tied to the conservation work being done in New York City by these organizations. Over 90% of respondents said major concerns were public funding and climate change, with over 60% wanting to increase government support of stewardship efforts and public awareness around environmental threats. We asked the stakeholders what tools they utilized in doing their work in New York City. We found that a variety of tools were used, including social and traditional media, conferences, government publications, and mapping tools. More than half of nonprofit or civic organizations used mapping tools, while over 90% of government agencies did. 30% of all mapping tool respondents used them on a monthly basis. Lastly, engaging how interested organizations were in collaborating with the Nature Conservancy on a comprehensive view of natural resources in New York City, over 30% were interested and 40% extremely interested. Of those interested on either level, their organizational objectives were improving coordination and collaboration among stakeholders, advancing environmental education, and improving equitable access to green spaces again. The survey helped us understand the needs and priorities of over 100 stakeholders in New York City. It also helped us understand that most organizations would be willing to collaborate with the Nature Conservancy on a comprehensive view of nature in New York City. The data, however, was inconclusive on whether a mapping tool providing this comprehensive view would improve natural resource management. A mapping tool could be helpful, but may not be the only way to support effective management of natural resources in New York City. Organizations already using a mapping tool might benefit from a more comprehensive view. Organizations not using a mapping tool might discover that a comprehensive tool is helpful to their work. A key result leading to this conclusion was that mapping tools were used as much as other resources, such as media, conferences, and government publications. We also concluded that any tool created by the Nature Conservancy should focus on developing an understanding of climate change and facilitating effective communication by increasing public awareness, advancing environmental education, and integrating various stakeholders. This improved communication and collaboration would potentially increase funding and awareness, two of the overarching needs reflected by the survey. It's important to note that access to baseline data, which is a capability in most mapping tools, was an important capacity to organizations in the survey, but was lower than concerns about funding, climate change, and awareness. So what does this mean for the Nature Conservancy moving forward? Our team is recommending that the Nature Conservancy gain a better understanding of urban natural resource management issues. As our survey avoided leading questions on the use of a mapping tool, the Nature Conservancy will need to further assess the functionalities of mapping tools currently being used by organizations, functionalities of existing mapping tools that might help organizations not using them, and the need for improvements in the existing tools. Our second recommendation for the Nature Conservancy is to determine exactly who the users of this comprehensive mapping tool would be. By determining the specific users of a comprehensive tool, the Nature Conservancy can focus on creating a tool that is tailored to their preferences. Lastly, we believe that the Nature Conservancy should organize a conference to facilitate dialogue on the lack of a comprehensive view of natural resources in New York City. This would provide a forum to present its vision for a comprehensive tool and allow stakeholders to understand how they could assist the Nature Conservancy in scoping efforts. These recommendations will better inform the Nature Conservancy's feasibility assessment over the coming months and would allow them to decide if moving forward with a comprehensive mapping tool would allow natural resource managers identified as target users of such a tool to be more effective and efficient in New York City. I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions about our project.
Okay, questions for Crystal?
Thank you, Crystal. It looked like a lot of the organizations were willing to collaborate on a comprehensive tool, so I'm wondering why in the conclusion you determined to not create one at all versus working with them.
Gotcha, good question. So as you could see from the previous slide, about 70% were interested in collaborating with the Nature Conservancy, but what you can't see here on the slide is that that specific question was their willingness to collaborate on a comprehensive view of natural resources in New York City. And so because the question wasn't leading specifically to a mapping tool, we felt, as with a descriptive survey, that you don't want to infer what that respondent is saying. So they could want to collaborate on maybe a social media application. It could be another tool, so.
Other questions for Chris?
Hey, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the decision behind employing a survey-based technique for collecting this data versus something a little bit more focused, like a focus group that might get you a more balanced representation of the different stakeholders. Just wanted to know if those were options on the table and why you decided to go with an online survey.
Gotcha. So the client did suggest a survey as one of the ways to gather this information. And as you see from the population of the number of organizations that touch natural resources in New York City, we used a pool of 453, but the first list was probably in excess of 600. So conducting focus groups within the time allotted would not have given us as many responses from such a large group. And so that's why we chose to do a descriptive survey so that we would be collecting information from the maximum number of stakeholders.
One of the prime concerns was climate change that you
Yes.
voiced. My guess is that many of the assets and natural resources are in low-lying areas. Has it come up how much those are under threat from sea level rise in the forthcoming decades? And conversely, would this mapping tool help to map out that threat and then translate that into possible remedial action or other actions and policies that may help to preserve it?
Gotcha. I'm going to take your second question last just because I don't want to forget the response to that. So there's an existing New York City climate change mapping tool available. So the Nature Conservancy hasn't decided to move forward with a mapping tool. What they're trying to look at is the feasibility of creating a comprehensive tool that would encompass not just the New York City climate change, but maybe OASIS functionality, maybe also integrating green map functionality, because there's various tools around. And so that's the view for that. With respect to climate change, it was definitely a threat. It was also an objective for many of the organizations. The specific threats within climate change, if we dig down into the responses, primary was coastal flooding, and heat waves was also another major concern. So we did poll about sea level rise. It just wasn't in the top majority of responses. But flooding, sea level rise is kind of connected to that. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, one last.
In terms of the survey, how did you get to 24%, I think 24%
Yeah.
Response rate?
Yeah, so with our survey response rate, we were extremely diligent, my entire Capstone team. We worked with our client to draft a very good introduction to the survey, which was emailed we used an online-based survey. just explaining the need for this. It's a very compelling story coming from the largest conservation organization, so that helped. We then completed 2 rounds per week of follow-up calls. So after each response would come through, they would be removed from the list, and then the team would divide out from all those who hadn't responded, and we did follow-up calls with the script, and were able to drive participation that way. We also offered a free Nature Conservancy water bottle to the first 50 respondents. And so, it's always great to get something free, and so, maybe that helped a little bit, but mainly just a lot of calling and having the talk track, right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, first an announcement before I bid you good night, and that is for those of you who are graduating, please see Marivi in the back who may record your name so that we get the pronunciation of your names correct during the graduation ceremony. Okay, so those were 4 very strong presentations. I'd like to congratulate each of the teams for their hard work and good analysis during the semester. It was gratifying to me to see how well you've done and how far along you've come. It was only about a month or 6 weeks ago that we were here for the midterm briefings, and so congratulations to all of you, and congratulations to the faculty advisors, Suzanne LaRoche, Kizzy Charles Guzman, and Thomas Abdallah. Okay, thank you very much.